that Maya and Isabella can see it afterwards. So yeah, we have an amazing lineup over the next few weeks as a group of activities, which are, or group of topics, which are connected together, very much connected together. We start with the kind of people side of change management. Arafat was just explaining some examples of where he's already facing some of those people challenges.
Yeah, it's not nice.
and there'll be more to come. I can guarantee.
Yeah.
We'll talk about, how do you overcome resistance? That as a starting point. Then we're going to connect that to how do you facilitate, which is a fantastic accelerator of change, getting people through resistance. And often we do that by bringing people into groups, workshops, events, these kind of things. But how do you facilitate those really well so that you do overcome the resistance and come to decisions? Because ultimately, a lot of the moving forward is about the decisions that get made, right? Then we're going to talk about hackathons, or the structure of a workshop effectively. How do you accelerate a piece of work in a project, product design, that kind of thing. So anything around hackathons, rapid improvement events. We'll talk then about how do you set one up for success? How do you prepare before those kind of events? How do you run an event now? What do you do after an event? And then we're going to talk about executive presence, which is when you think of the great leaders that you can hold up and aspire to be, how do they walk out onto stage in front of hundreds, thousands of people and stand there confidently and deliver a great message, leadership, facilitation, run something, tell people stuff? How do you build up that kind of executive presence? And it can be built up, absolutely can be learned. And then the final thing then is coaching. So rather than telling people what to do, how do you coach them to come to the answers themselves so they do it for themselves and not necessarily do it because you've told them to do it? So all of these things that are very much connected, and they're all accelerators for getting stuff done, overcoming resistance, motivating people, leading people, to achieve goals, objectives, deliver new products, whatever it might be. So these next sessions are really connected, but the foundation then is a bit around the change management. Why do people resist, and how can you overcome that resistance? Make sense? Make sense?
Yes.
Excited?
Yes.
For this slide, you can tell I'm a bit more excited than usual, because these are really beneficial learnings for anything, where any kind of consultancy at any level, any kind of project management at any level, and anything where you're really having to work in groups to get things done, product development especially. I know Jamie's focusing on innovation, building up an innovation team. It's perfect stuff for really helping all of that go faster, smoother, better. So it's been a long learning for me. It took me years until I realized that actually this is quite a useful, accelerating topic. When I started in projects, really early, like you have. You're all super young and you're all doing projects already, which is fantastic. I think Arafat was alluding to this a little bit when we started. For me, the projects I was doing had a super clear business case, absolutely obvious. Launching a new product that was going to make, thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions. Improving the way a factory ran, which would save millions, etc. And yet somehow, every time I was doing these projects with an absolutely clear business case, nobody would want to do the project, or nobody would want the outcomes of the project. And it just confused me at the start. You know, why do I face so much resistance when the benefits are so obvious? And so over time, you know, I learned more and more about, you know, why are people resisting obvious business cases? Why is that a challenge for people? Why don't people want to change? And I ended up actually focusing far more on that topic than I was running projects, still running projects, but I was spending 80% of my time doing stakeholder management, change management, communication, and only 20% of my time was actually spent on the project management bit, you know, doing the project plan, all of that kind of stuff. So, so it is a good topic, a set of topics that genuinely will help you accelerate anything that you need to do. So that's the introduction speech. Thoughts, reactions, experiences?
We had an experience organizing a hackathon in Serbia.
Excellent.
It was completely online. So yeah, it was called a challenge rather than a hackathon, because we weren't present at the place or whatever. But it was my first time like being part of sort of like the whole organization, and we were pretty inexperienced. There weren't many results from the hackathon, so yeah, I don't know like what I've learned from it. Was it like the lack of communication with the candidates, or what happened there? But I'm hoping to learn more about like how to make them better in the future, and see like how to run those and organize and get like some benefits from from them.
You mentioned a couple of really important things there, you know, communication with the team and the candidates that are in there. That's super important. That comes to then the facilitation. I mean, I've also participated in hackathons and things like that. And I mean, you see it with any presentations, trainings, any workshops, anything like that. The success of the workshop is so dependent on the person running the workshop. If they're not excited, motivated, if they don't know how to manage, you know, the crowd, it's often super boring, terribly chaotic, and you get nothing out of it. Okay? So we'll learn some of the skills of how you can really run a fantastic hackathon and really get some fantastic results out of it, for sure. Excellent, excellent. Other experiences, thoughts? No, not now. Should we jump in then? I have a few slides, but more the conversation as we go through. So let me pull up just a couple of slides. Let's start here. I think would be the best place to start. So, I mean, these are just some of the classic statistics, but they are genuinely important. So many projects fail, big, small. You know, really the chance of success of a project, and by success I mean delivered on time, in full, with, you know, no errors or replanning of the project. Very rare, actually. There are so many projects that fail, and one of the greatest reasons why they fail is the lack of stakeholder engagement. You know, engagement with the people that either use the system at the end of it, that you know, have the product at the end of it, that go through the change at the end of it. And there are nowadays, I mean, there's been thousands of studies on all of this. Nowadays, it's pretty clear. If there's no executive sponsor, the project, I can guarantee you it will fail, really, unless there is some very strong bottom-up, ground reason to do it. I can absolutely guarantee you that it will fail. And again, no matter how small or how big the organization is, if there's not an executive that's genuinely sponsoring it, by sponsoring, I mean that they provide the resources for it, so budget, people, time, that they will stand up in front of others and communicate about it, that they will be involved at a certain level, and get involved and understand the progress of the project, and that they get rid of roadblocks. That's a true sponsor. There aren't many executives that understand what sponsorship is, by the way, and often you'll find you have to train the sponsors and tell the executives actually what they need to do, because they've never been trained, what sponsorship is. So you actually have to tell them it's your role. You need to provide the resources that are required to deliver the project. And by the way, we'll need you to communicate occasionally. And by the way, if we really get stuck, please help us, clear the roadblocks. You often have to train them to do that. The second big factor is have some kind of change management, or at least have somebody or part of somebody that focuses a bit on change management. And by change management, we don't just mean communication, because often in companies, that change management is just communication. That's not the case. Change management is exactly what we're going to go through in the next sessions. It's about, facilitating work. It's about running things like hackathons. It's about anything that accelerates people through the change curve and the learning curve. That's change management. Communication, of course, is a part of that, but it's a very small part of that. And that will increase the success, even if you have just a little bit of that, by up to 6 times the improvement in success ratio. And then the last critical success factor, statistically proven, then, is who sends the message. This is why the sponsor is so important. You can see the, any business messages, like the business case. Why do we need to do this project? Why do we need to develop a new product? Why do we need to drive innovation? Why do we need to? You need an executive to message that, because people listen to the leaders. They don't listen to the project manager, right? They'll listen to the leader. And when it comes to personal messages, this is very important for change. If somebody is having to use a new system, if somebody has to change their role a little bit, if somebody is being impacted by a process change or a reorganization, they don't want to hear that from the executive. They want to hear that from their boss, because their boss is ultimately the person that pays them, pays the bonus and everything else. So personal messages, anything that impacts somebody personally, it has to come from the line manager. Again, the project manager, they don't want to hear from the project manager or the change manager. They want to hear from their line manager. And the reason why I bring these up, because when it comes to resistance, these factors are the best ways to overcome resistance. So if there is a personal impact, as a project manager, it's almost impossible to try and convince somebody that they need to change a role, change an organization. Get their boss to do it, though, and you will overcome resistance faster. Get the sponsor to talk about why we do it. You will overcome resistance faster. So they are statistically proven success factors, if you look at it like that. Then something you won't see from the consultants. It's funny because this slide tends to get hidden a lot, which always surprises me because I think this is a fundamental slide. And I've worked in a lot of consultancies around this topic. And some of the best change managers will know about this. And by some of the best, some of the best people that work with politicians that have to implement some difficult, laws, changes, these kind of things. And they understand this particular slide very well. But in change management methodologies, you never see it. You never see it. And it's a bit of a shame because it really is a fundamental decision early on in any kind of project or change. There are two types of change: compliance or commitment. All of the change management methodologies only focus on commitment. But the reality is a lot of change is actually you just need compliance, right? A change in the law, it's just about compliance. Once the law has been made, it's just about compliance, right? A new IT system. If you've launched a new IT system, you just need people to comply, like a new travel and expense system, for example. No, they just have to use the new travel and expense system. It's not about gaining commitment or collaboration. They just need to use the new travel and expense system. Great example of that, very much recently, everything that we've gone through with COVID and things like that, especially in businesses, not going into the office, wearing a mask in the office. That's not something that's a collaborative decision or we need a level of commitment from. You just need compliance. So there's a different route in communicating and change management for topics that you just need compliance on. The big mistake that goes on here is that people don't understand that it's necessarily a compliance change, and so they go the commitment route. And then they wonder why nobody's complying, because they've not built up the commitment or gone through the whole change management process to create commitment. And then, of course, then no one's complying with the requirements, be it a new IT system or things like that. And yeah, then they get problems. Then they really get problems. So just to think about whenever you're going into a particular project, you're delivering something new, is it more that you just need compliance at the end of that project? Or is it more that, no, you really need commitment, you really need people to collaborate and to buy into what you're doing, what you're selling, what the product is? It's the first thinking point, and it can save you a huge amount of time and effort if you really go, no, actually, this is just compliance. So if it's compliance, we'll go this change management route. If it's commitment, we have to do a lot more effort to build that level of collaboration up. Last couple of little slides, then I'll shut up and we can discuss. If there is genuinely one thing that's certain in any kind of change, no matter how small or how big, there will be resistance at different levels. Sometimes the resistance can be small, but it will still be there. I can guarantee you it will still be there. Sometimes the resistance is huge, even when the business case can be massively logical. I'll give you a good example of where I really struggled to understand the resistance that was coming. When I was working at Credit Suisse, I was working on a project to create a new fund, a new type of financial fund called an exchange traded fund swap, complicated kind of financial instrument. But it was a super secure fund, and we were launching it in 2009 after the 2008 banking crash. So it was a fantastic product because it was super secure for investors. They weren't going to lose any money on this kind of product. They could only really make money on this product. And the business case within the bank was about $1 billion was the business case. And I'm not joking there, that was the business case. The resistance we had trying to get this product off the ground was ridiculous. And, you know, from all the senior executives in part of the bank, huge arguments were going on about why we shouldn't launch this product and all that kind of stuff. Incredible. So we had to do huge amounts of change management with the executive team to convince them and work through their resistance to get their commitment to launch the fund. And the real commitment was, you know, underwriting the fund by about 100 million when the business case was $1 billion. So, and, you know, 100 million actually for these kind of banks is not a massive amount of money. So in the end, we launched the product. In the first 12 days, we had subscriptions of over $2.8 billion. And yet the resistance we had on this product to launch this project was just massive. And all my time was spent pretty much between the lawyers and writing the contracts, was spent doing change management with the executive. So resistance, even for the most obvious business cases, will come. It starts with denial at a personal level. We can often work through the denial pretty quickly. This is where the executive sponsors can have a great impact, accelerating people through denial by really saying, no, this change is coming. I know you might not like it, but this change is coming, but we're going to do everything we can to support you, kind of communications and change management from the sponsorship. Then comes the resistance. And every individual will resist for different reasons. That's an important factor to take into account. We'll explore that in a bit. Once people start to realize that the change is not necessarily going away and they can't avoid the change, then that resistance will start to turn into exploration. And this is where they might be, you know, trying to negotiate a good result for themselves, trying to adjust the change to suit themselves a bit better. They'll try and trade and, you know, negotiate. And then finally, in the last 5% of the change curve, then you might get a bit of commitment. At any point between denial and exploration, it can go right the way back to denial again. That's also important to understand. You might think, yes, we've just about got everybody over the line, and then something can happen, and it can just be a word in a communication. I've seen that genuinely happen. The executive said the wrong thing in a town hall. It sent everybody back to denial again, just because he used a couple of wrong words in a town hall. So resistance for sure is certain, and it is based, that's the simple version of the classic you know, change curve diagram, you know, through denial, through resistance, eventually to adoption and ownership. Sometimes if the change is not done well, nobody adopts. And I've seen this with launches of very expensive IT systems, where in the end, after a couple of years, nobody's using the very expensive IT system. And so another project is started to create another IT system. Away they go through the change again. So sorry, that was a bit of a long lecture, but I wanted to get through a little bit the kind of the theory behind everything, and then open for discussion. Helpful? Seen it before? Reactions? Discuss.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely interesting. I mean, it's weird because they have like the what do you call it, like resistance right in the middle, and it kind of comes in every project. There's always someone who resists, and then so it's just like the one that's annoying is when you can't convince them to change. So like it gets stuck in the resistance page, sorry, the resistance part, and then performance just keeps going down and down and down, as opposed to the point of inflection that you can see on that graph there, for example. So I guess the most important thing is like, how do you get them past that resistance so that they actually do say yes in the end and stop resisting? Because otherwise it kind of goes like the other direction, right? It keeps just going down and down.
It can just spiral down and down and down, and resistance, you know, can feed anger and fear, a lot of fear mongering. I mean, Brexit is a great example of where no change management was done at all during the whole Brexit process, and of course it just became a disaster, right? more resistance, more fear mongering, more resistance, more anger, more denial, and round in spirals it went, right? Perfect example of no change management. Yeah, absolutely. Other thoughts, reactions? What types of resistance have you come across? What different examples of resistance have you got?
Like people just being scared, like not wanting to take a risk.
Yeah.
Could be it's too costly.
Too costly? Yeah, exactly. Excuses, too costly. Absolutely.
Yeah, people not wanting to, like, knowing it's going to put work on their plate, so they'll be like, yeah, no, we probably shouldn't do it that way. Like,
Not having a full understanding of the product that they're trying to produce. So I think one of the things that I guess stakeholders and the higher ups, right, they don't fully understand that the product they're producing. They understand it from a high level point of view, but the actual people who do fully understand are, the people building the system themselves. I mean, I myself working on a project now, and I understand it really well from a high level point of view. But then when I actually talk to the configurers, I see this project, there's so much potential with it. There's so much potential with the system that they're building. So I think, that that difference, that understanding of the product itself, if everyone had it, then you can definitely, it could definitely go about driving change and going back to what James said, driving past the resistance point. But yeah, I think that's what I've seen.
Good examples. Good. Other examples? Really good examples. We'll dive into a few of these in a minute.
For me, I think it's also important to let the individuals go through this cycle. Sometimes, like in the resistance phase, there can be other changes, like the management doesn't stick with one change. Instead, like they suggest another, like in the stage of resistance.
Oh yeah.
And then you go into the cycle again. So I'm like when seeing this, it's like it takes time for like people to understand and accept and adopt. So yeah, I'm thinking about that also.
I think people in general are just sometimes afraid. I think some people invite change, whilst others just want to carry, what did they say, business as usual, right? So they just want to go about doing the things as usual, and they don't really want to go about doing anything different because I mean, if you're comfortable as to where you are and if you're producing results, then there shouldn't be any change. But I think if you can look past that barrier and sort of see change as a way to benefit yourself and to establish new outcomes that could bring about better benefits in the product that you're trying to produce or in your organization, then I think that would help.
Absolutely. You've all just covered some really important points. If you think about those kind of examples for a moment, dive into that. There's some really good learnings that you can take from all of that behind that. There is a fantastic book which I would really encourage you to go and buy on Amazon or wherever, called Who Moved My Cheese? Who Moved My Cheese? And it really talks about why we get comfortable in our business as usual lives, which is a funny thing. We actually kind of humans like change in their personal lives. We like to get the latest technology, the latest car. We like to continually upgrade ourselves with a better house or whatever it would be. We kind of aspire for change in our personal lives. But when it comes to business, our work life, we actually hate change. We love stability, right? And the book Who Moved My Cheese it's kind of an analogy story for change. It's about, you know, a few mice in a maze, and you know, they have their cheese, right? Big pile of cheese, and they're very happy with their big pile of cheese. But what happens if one day your big pile of cheese is taken away from you, it disappears? Then what do you do in that situation? And of course, that's very similar when we're changing anything in business. And that could be just as something simple as replacing an old finance system with a new finance system. Fundamentally does the same thing. It just, you know, might be a bit better, faster. That can be scary for people, especially if they've been using the old system for like 20 years and that's their life, right? So there's a lot of reasons why resistance comes around, and it's only natural, and that's an important statement. It really is only natural that there is resistance. But also a lot of executives don't understand that resistance is just a natural reaction to change, and actually it's okay for people to resist, because actually if they don't go through the resistance phase, they can never reach the adoption phase. And that's really important to understand from a change management perspective. So the resistance can actually, you can turn resistance into something useful as part of that change process. When you see resistance, that's a fantastic indicator that at least that person has arrived at that point. And then to Jamie's point, then how do you get them past the resistance? And we'll come to that. There are many forms of resistance. It can come in many different ways. You know, I see a lot of people keep asking, I need more detail. I need more detail, because they're not comfortable with the ambiguity. A little bit back to the communication preferences. The different communication preferences, you can also predict the way in which they will resist. So the procedural types, for example, communication preference, they won't be happy until they really see the finished product. A bit to Arafat's kind of example. Procedural kind of thinking people will really need to see the final product until they really understand it. You can explain all you like, but until they've actually seen it, they'll struggle to really buy into it. On the other side, though, the creative communication things, if you just tell them the idea, they'll buy into the idea quicker. Yeah, so you can also play a bit the communication preferences, but that's for another lesson at some point in time. So, okay, how do you move people through resistance? I like this because it's the simple way of doing change management. Although it took me a lot of years until I finally found this particular gem of change management. So how do you accelerate people through resistance? You need to make sure they feel that they've been seen and that they've been heard. The best way to do that is get their input. Even better if you can do that in a workshop where they write all of their input down on post-it notes and stick it on a board. That way they've been seen and heard. So already that helps them. Okay, they're listening to me. Fantastic. I'm willing then to start to think about changing. One way of getting through resistance really quick. When you hit that resistance point and you're being faced with resistance, best thing you can do it only takes 15 minutes. 15-minute workshop, get them to put lots of post-it notes, even on a virtual whiteboard like Klaxoon, etc. You will help already accelerate them through resistance. Next is respect. I think that's super important anyway in any kind of business function. But if they don't feel like they're being respected, then immediately resistance will come. So treat people with respect. Acknowledge that, yeah, there's a change, and yeah, we can see that it will impact you, and we respect that it's going to impact you, and we'll listen to you immediately. Give them some safety. I think that's always important, and help people feel that they belong. So that's where you can really talk about groups. you're part of this team, you're part of that team, and the team is all going through the change at the same time. It makes them feel like that it's not just the change is impacting them and them only. Then they can see that it's part of a group. And that way it makes them feel a little bit more secure and a bit safe, but it's not only them personally that's being impacted, but they're actually part of a group. They belong to a group. They can go through the change together. So if you do nothing else on change management, if you just focus on these 5 things, you will already accelerate people through that resistance phase. Create ways where they can be seen, heard, respected, make them feel safe and that they belong to a group of people. Make them even feel that they belong to the project and the project success. That will already help accelerate people through the resistance phase. So it's super simple in a way. It's taken me a long time to find this little gem that can genuinely help people through that change curve really quickly. Of course, behind that then, there are some really good structures. And we talk about, every individual has different reasons to resist. And so focusing and listening to individuals' change needs, you can then group that together then into the organizational change need. And as long as people have had their input, they will recognize their input being represented in whatever change activities you do or communications you do. So everybody needs to go from the present to the future, the past to the future. But you can do it one at a time. We used to have a saying in one of the really big projects I ran that we would leave no person behind, that we would really walk through the 1,000 or so people that we needed to change. We started at the organizational level. Maybe 70% of the people were perfectly fine with the change that we were doing, and then we got to the kind of the last 5% where really we had to speak to them individually to get them to change. And this was just about moving offices, by the way, a completely new setup of office space, which you would not believe how much resistance we got from that. But we really left nobody behind in the change, and it worked super well in the end. Now to the process of how you not only attack the resistance, but push people through or accelerate people through the change. There are 2 really good processes. One is the change acceleration process. It's a good old GE process by Kotter. And it starts with creating the awareness, the shared need, the vision, the mission. That's all good executive level stuff. Building commitment is then about using all of the tactics to overcome resistance. When you're getting certain traction, you're overcoming resistance. How do you keep the momentum going and stop people slipping back into denial, etc., or back into resistance? And then once you've implemented the key change, how do you make change last? When I started doing projects, did so many projects, and then also couldn't understand why, like 3 or 6 months after we did the project, that people had just gone back to the old way of working or the old way of making stuff, delivering stuff. And it was really frustrating to see that, work on a project for 6 months, get great results, and then 3 months later, everybody just ignored what you'd done in the project and went back to the old way of working. So making the change last is also a key phase after producing something, going live, whatever it might be. The most popular change management methodology, if you like, that's used today, it's kind of been built into Agile as well, is ProSci ADKAR model. And ProSci is actually an Australian institute of change management. They're based in Australia, but have become global in terms of how they do it. And the ADKAR model works really well for IT system implementations. It's built for IT system implementations. It's not so good at like cultural or organizational changes. You can use it, but it's not so flexible for more complex change or cultural, organizational change or cultural changes. There, the change acceleration process is much better. ADKAR stands for, as you can see on the slide, awareness, desire, knowledge, ability. I'm not super happy with the word desire, but I know where it comes from. That's the building commitment out of the change acceleration process. And awareness is just, what is the change about? Building that commitment talks about what's in it for me with them, with me. Knowledge is then the training curve, getting people up the training and the ability curve, and then reinforcement is making the change stick. So a lot of the action around change management happens in this desire phase of the ADKAR model. That's where a lot of the change management activities are often focused. So again, it was a bit lecture-y style, but I'll take a pause there. Reactions, perceptions, thoughts? You've all gone to sleep on me. How can this help you overcome the resistance?
For me personally, I think I believe, I'm not sure, that I don't at least feel a lot of resistance for a change, but I'm not sure. It's like with every other thing, I guess, in life, that in work you need to like accept and adapt and try to understand. My problems sometimes come from lack of understanding, and that's like when I feel the resistance, because I don't understand the product, the result, the like expectations. So it's also important that like you have a way to like come to understanding, and that it is explained, and that the plan is somewhat in place before you try to implement the change and everything.
So that's really good. You come at that from a personal angle, which is fantastic, because it raises a couple of really good points. One, different people go through the change curve differently. Some people just go through it very quickly. They maybe been very used to change in their life, or they're just very comfortable with change in their life, and they can go through change super quick. Other people can get really stuck. And you touched on that first part here on the ADKAR model, which is awareness. Driving awareness is about to help others change. Driving awareness is about really informing everybody in exactly what's going on, because it's difficult to change if you don't know what's going on, or you don't understand it well, or if you don't know a certain level of details that you're comfortable with. And so the awareness phase, in kind of accelerating the change, the awareness phase is really important to lay the foundation so that everybody has all of the information they need to at least understand the change that's coming. They might not agree with the change, but at least they understand it at that point. So really good insight. Thank you, Sarah. It's very good.
Mark, about the fear of failing. I think, people want to change because there's always a chance, but if you do change, then, will you actually be able to adapt to that changing condition? And I think, going back to what I said earlier, I think I'm not sure if you need construction at home, this is bad timing, but I think, you know, if change is one of those things people are reluctant to go towards because, you know, it's just learning a new skill takes time. You know, it's people, you know, people may be afraid of the new technology because they're not familiar with it. I think this is general, right? If you're not familiar with something, then, you know, you don't really want to delve into it. But I think what's important is if people are made aware of the benefits, then, and they can see that, you know, it can have a huge impact on the way you work, you know, can have a huge impact on your skill set, then yeah, I think people would invite it more. But I think it's just getting through that distinction, right? Just making sure they understand the benefits and seeing what they can gain out of it.
That's it. And you can structure what you've just said, actually. So the benefits is the what's in it for me, right? You know, really help them understand the what's in it for them. And sometimes that can be at a very personal level. Second is then help them feel safe that they're going to get the support and the training they need so that they can use the new system, new tools, new process effectively. And all of that can help to eliminate the fear of failure. So you're exactly right in what you've said. What things like ADCAR can do, or even back to those 5 very simple needs, you can structure that then into your project plan. If you structure those kind of activities then around awareness, building the awareness, around really explaining the what's in it for me, around how do we help people and support people to learn the new tool quickly, you build that into your project plan, fantastic. You will definitely accelerate people through the resistance curve by doing that. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think it's just one of those things where I guess I fell victim to. I can't talk about anyone else, but just like the fear of failing, especially just my time at secondary school. And yeah, secondary school mainly, it was just when I was going near my GCSEs, I always thought, oh, what if I fail this test, or what if I do this? It's just, you know, all those things come into your head. But if you can get rid of that fear, I think the results would be tremendous. I think it's just that there in your head, just thinking, oh wow, if apologies, I'm cutting on and off. There's construction going on at home. So yeah, getting rid of that fear, that fear factor, it's a big thing, right? But I think, you know, it's okay to fail. You know, it happens. But I think what's most important is that you put in the work not to fail. So if you put in the work not to fail, right, then, you know, chances are you're not going to fail. And yeah, as long as you put in the shift, everything should be fine. That's the way I see it. I'm not sure about anyone else, but yeah.
And that's a little bit about safety. Help people feel safe.
Yeah.
You know, with the change to come. So then maybe I just wanted to touch on one last key piece, and it's linked to the very first slide and the statistics there. There's a triangle of robust project change setup. And there's the change management piece, so having something around ADCAR or something where you at least address the 5 basic needs, build that in then to a plan, right? You know, have a change management plan, very simple. Link that to the project plan. So even if you have a few of those steps around building awareness, you know, talking about what's in it for me, have a little bit of training, that's change management. That should be linked to the project plan. Obviously, project management is an important factor. If people can't see what's coming or what's planned, you won't get anywhere even with change management. So project plan is also an important part of change management because of the ambiguity of starting from nothing and ending with something. You have to go through a process. So project management is equally as important. And then this whole thing around sponsorship and leadership. You need all 3 of these topics and they need to work really closely together. And often it's the change management corner that pulls in the leadership and pulls on the project management to help people through then the change curve itself. If you can really get those three things working well together, success is almost guaranteed. Success is almost guaranteed. You'll be far more successful with the business case and everything else out of a project, can guarantee you. So with that, last couple of minutes for any key questions. We'll continue working on this. Then around then, how do you pull people together to accelerate moments of change in the next session as well. But we'll come to that next week. So any critical questions right now?
No, nothing for me. Thank you.
No thoughts? Mina, you've been very quiet today. Anything from your side?
No, thank you.
Jamie, last chance.
No, sorry, I'm still a bit ill. No, that was really informative. Thank you, Mark.
Good.
Mark, just one more thing.
Sure.
With going back to what you said about saying the right things to help motivate people to go about going towards this change. Really badly worded. What are some of the things you'd say in general, like that could, I guess, persuade people to go towards that, if that makes sense? So, I mean, one of the things you said before was how, one guy in that hall, said the wrong thing, and then that caused everyone else just to shift towards the other side and say, no, we don't really want to go about, taking part in this project. So, what do we actually say? I know it's quite general, but is there something, it's all good, well and good, just talking about the benefits and of the project, and this project can do X, Y, and Z, but is there a way of just presenting that?
Yeah, there is. There's a process to determine the right communications. There's a process. It starts actually with, I'll do it very quickly. It starts with understanding where the majority of people are on the change curve. Are they just in the initial phases of denial and awareness? Or are they really hard in the resistance phase? Or are they majority starting to come out of the resistance phase? So that's the first factor you take into account. Second factor you take into account is then the communication preferences of the group. Are they, tend to be more creative, logical, procedural, or interpersonal, for example? And then once you've assessed that, then you look at the content-specific message that needs to go out at that moment in time. And so there's a process you can work through to try and get to the right set of words that will resonate the best, and avoid those set of words that are actually going to go completely opposite to what will make people comfortable. For example, so if you're bang smack in the middle of awareness and you're just starting to hit resistance, and then you happen to drop a few words that, oh, we're going to reorganize your team, that's not good. A good moment in time, right? Because they haven't even understood or got to the point where they're resisting the change. And then if you go and just tell them that, hey, your whole organization is going to be cut by like 50%, that's not a good time to inform people on that kind of change, right? So there is a process you can go through for preparing that. But maybe that's another more detailed session to get into that sometime.
Thank you.
Very good. Then with that, thank you very much for joining today. Great to have you all on the session. Look forward to next week's session. Have a great Friday and weekend.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Cheers.